Hello, this is Meghna
And this is Dana, and today we're going to talk about the AIDS epidemic.
and the cultural anxiety that involves it.
Let's start with some background details about the AIDS epidemic. Before the AIDS epidemic, the US was going through a golden age of promiscuity. Gay activism had reached its peak, abortions were allowed, and birth control pills were invented. Antibiotics fought against STDs. People were under the impression that sex no longer had risks. However, in the early 1980s, some homosexual men were reported to have rare diseases found in severely immunosuppressed patients. It was initially called gay-related immunodeficiency by the scientific community and gay cancer by the media. So how did it spread and why did it affect the gay community first? It's silly to think that the virus would have a preference for just gay people. The oversimplified answer is unsafe sex practices. Dugas was a French-Canadian flight attendant and is often regarded as patient zero. He is rumored to have sex with 2,500 men worldwide and is speculated to have brought the virus to the gay communities in New York and San Francisco. Unsafe sex practices in gay bathhouses led to the spread of the disease like wildfire. Gays tend to stick to their own kind, so for a long time only other gays were getting it.
The groups of people accusing the gays had different reasons to do so. People with strong religious beliefs who thought homosexuality was a sin believed that God punished them with the mysterious deadly disease. Even people who weren't strictly religious but simply homophobic happily blamed them. It didn't help that the greater number of AIDS patients were Latinos and black people, who represented minorities who still had to face racial discrimination. Therefore, people had less sympathy for them and didn't really care. For a long time, the president even refused to confirm the epidemic. Meanwhile, the government didn't give enough money to the research and later banned the use of federally funds for AIDS prevention campaigns by homosexuals, showing their disapproval for their sexuality.
AIDS victims not only struggled with an incurable unknown disease but also felt isolated as people feared being infected. Religious fanatics made them feel that they were being punished by God. They felt utterly helpless and alone. AIDS victims also underwent legal discrimination. In 1985, the Department of Defense decided to test new recruits for HIV and reject those who tested positive. In 1987, HIV-infected travelers and immigrants were barred from traveling to the US. The ban was not lifted until 2009. Inhuman incidents occurred during the AIDS hysteria. 20 Colombia police had once raided a gay social club wearing full-body armor. Once, a motorist ran over a guy he thought was gay and called an AIDS hotline to ask how he could decontaminate his bike. There were also constant refusals to bury them. They didn't even get peace in death. One of the more popular victims of the AIDS was Ryan White. He was an Indiana teenager who put a face on the AIDS campaign. Ryan was a hemophilic who had contracted the AIDS after blood transfusion. He was banned from going to school and had to take 7th grade lessons from a telephone hookup at home. When he was finally granted permission to go to school, he was taunted at school. Kids wrote obscenities on his lockers and shouted insults. Vandals broke windows and slashed car tires. His story was shared with thousands of other AIDS victims.
Right after the epidemic started, not a lot changed, since it were just gay minorities who were affected. But as soon as drug users, infants, and people with blood transfusion got AIDS, people suddenly started to care. No one wanted to associate with gay men. Gay people's houses were burned down in hopes of making them move, and they were fired for openly living their sexuality. Families abandoned their homosexual sons, but for those, another part of the gay community came to help. Lesbians supported the gay man. People were so scared that they claimed in a survey from the LA Times that they wanted gays to have something to identify them as gays. 50% demanded to quarantine the AIDS patients, 48% wanted identity cards, and 15% even voted for them to get a tattoo, method similarly used in the World War II against the Jewish.
Free created using Powtoon.